Good morning. I have a treat for you. This is something I've been thinking about doing for a very long time. Some of you are very familiar with this bike. Some of you weren't born yet when this bike really did some pretty cool stuff. A little brief history for those of you who don't know. This is my 1997 Suzuki Bandit, and it was officially the first street legal motorcycle to break into the 7-second zone in a quarter mile. I've got stories galore that I'll get to, but what I wanted to do today is just give you an overview of the bike. And today is May 22nd, 2020. I'm gonna date myself here, so be gentle. 20 years ago today this is the anniversary, the 20th anniversary of getting into the 7. So I'm going to take you guys, we're going to go for a ride, we're going to take the bike into work, we're going to talk stories. But like I said, let me go ahead and sort of tell you a little bit about the bike. Most people are really surprised when they hear that a Suzuki Bandit was the first bike into the 7s. You had GS 1150s, you had GSXRs, there were so many other bikes that were competing. Turbo ZX11s. There were a lot of bikes that could make a lot of power back then. So we chose a Bandit, and I talked about this in one other video, because we had some advantages. Basically what the class rules were, you had a 68-inch wheelbase, street tire, no wheelie bars. The bike had to be self-starting and self-reliant. In order to test that, we would actually go on a 25-mile road course. And if you made it the 25 miles, you turned your bike off, and then you turned it back on, and it fired up under power, that qualified you to drag race the bike. If you couldn't do that, we had a lead bike and a chase bike, and if you passed the lead bike, you were out. If the chase bike passed you, you were out. Some guys got flat tires, bikes that overheat, just all kinds of stuff. But anyway, so after that 25 miles, then we would start to qualify, and we'd run the class in a regular drag race format. I chose the Bandit because it had some advantages over the GSXR, namely the chassis, and I'm just going to go through the bike and what's been done to it. A Bandit starts off as, I think, 1157 cc's. It might make 90 horsepower at the rear wheel on our dyno. They're not a very strong engine, but they were based on the air oil-cooled GSXR 1100 platform. So a lot of the parts would interchange, and we would just use the ones from the GSXR that we needed. Chassis-wise, the first thing I did, I went to Terry McIntosh and I said, listen, I want to rake the steering neck, but when we rake it, we don't want to put it way out forward because that would move our center of gravity back. We want to actually pull it in, maybe throw a little rake in it for stability, because the bike's fast. This bike's been 185 miles an hour in a quarter mile. But we also want to pull the forks back, because with a set wheelbase of 68 inches, the further this comes back, the longer the swing arm can be and still get that 68 inches. So if you want to zoom in, you can see here, we had it so close that I actually rubbed a hole in the exhaust at one point, trying to figure everything out, and we got really precise with these bikes, because once you got to a certain point, you couldn't go any faster, so you had to figure out what needed to go on. From an engine standpoint, the cylinder head is brutally simple. Stock seats, stock valve seats. I'd run 30 millimeter intakes, and we'd actually put 26 millimeter exhausts on the stock seats, which hung over the seats a little bit. But the problem with aftermarket seats is they always wanted to fall out. And then the cylinder heads, I learned from racing Pro Mod way back in the day that I can spend $5 grand on the trickiest cylinder head ever, and then make one nitrous tune-up mistake and melt it and destroy it, and it yanks the wallet out of my pocket. So I just quit doing that. I ported my own cylinder heads with a hand drill and a cartridge roll, right? Just to basically match stuff up, because the other thing I realized in nitrous racing for so many years is it just doesn't matter, right? What we wanted to do was build an engine that was extremely strong. We were going to make mistakes, so we knew we were going to tear stuff up, so we tried to keep it economical. Like I said, I could port one of those heads in about 45 minutes. It just didn't take much. Then we put in some Bob Carpenter valve springs, do a valve jobs just for the bigger valves, and then just dump as much nitrous oxide to it as we could figure out how to put in until we blew it up. We fixed it, we made it stronger so that we could put more in. You see a pattern here, right? So this engine is actually, it's got a 7mm Falicon billet stroker crank, which didn't fit. The stuff you had to do, I wish I could take this thing apart, but we had to machine the connecting rod, the Carrillo H-beam connecting rod caps. We had to machine them thinner, machine the bolt heads off, grind out it all inside of here, and because that crank just was never meant to fit or anything close to it. We've got 86mm MTC pistons, tool steel wrist pins. The bike displacement went from 1157 cc's to 1570 cc's, and I kept making it bigger, the bore bigger. Not only did it give you a little more torque to help the bike leave, but it gave you a bigger hole to shove more nitrous into, because nitrous racing is all about how much you can put in. We moved back, we got 40mm Key flat slide carbs, you know, because I really did. I rode this bike on the street. I put 400 miles on it at Bike Week 2000 in Daytona. I got pictures of the bike riding it in the sand, you know, on Daytona Beach. So we've got simple carburetors. Nitrous Express, one of my very first sponsors, and I really like those guys. They made a hell of a nitrous kit, and basically what we did, we took the Pro Mod motorcycle kit, Pro Comp, Pro Mod, I guess, depending on what you want to call it. But I mean, these kits were designed for big old car tire bikes and wheelie bars, and you could just put as much power to them as you wanted to. In my first stage of nitrous, I've got it set at about 150 horsepower. The engine makes about 200, but like I said, it's really strong. So you take a 200 horsepower engine, shove 150 more to it, and how does that get applied? So a lot of guys put stuff on timers and gear and shift counters and all this stuff. Well, the problem with that is if you've got your nitrous in a timer, your timer has no idea if you screwed up the launch and you're wheeling. So the last thing in the world you want in the middle of fighting a wheelie is to have your nitrous come on all by itself, right? That's crazy. So we have a wide open throttle switch. My nitrous is in the starter button. So basically all I had to do was launch the bike, tote the front wheel, and as soon as I felt that wheel start to go down, stab the nitrous button. And of course, if you just throw 150 horsepower directly to it, it just, right, sliding down the track. We used a progressive nitrous controller, which I'll show you, which allowed us to slowly bring the nitrous in. And the secret was to time it to where, because wheelies are your enemy on a no wheelie bar bike, right? Pretty straightforward. But we would time it and we'd ramp the nitrous out. So once that front wheel would drop down, we'd stab the nitrous, it'd pick it up again, go forward, hit the air shifter, more nitrous is coming in, go forward, and I mean, on a good run, this bike would would tote the front wheel damn near to the 8th mile on a really nice smooth run. So anyway, moving back, the clutch, we used a GSXR clutch. It's got an MTC billet basket, a single stage lockup. Our very first clutch cushion that I ever designed is right in here. And then we had a nitrous back cut transmission from Market R&D Motorsports. The problem with nitrous is once you started putting those really big loads in there, everything would just get distorted. The cases would get distorted. We were breaking crankshafts, and to stop breaking cranks, we put a big block in, because as you're going down the track and the nitrous is pushing down on the crank, it was flexing the crank and causing it to break. So when we put that big block in there, it made it a lot more rigid. You could press down harder. You didn't break your crank. You didn't break your cases. Market R&D, we went an entire season without being able to shift into high gear. And we basically figured out that with a back cut transmission, it was sucking the trans over so hard that the pin on the shift fork was getting bound. So we started to relieve the shift drum, let that move around, let it be a little looser. Next thing you know, we've got a bike that shifts consistently all the way down the track. Our very first Dragshock, working with Ohlins, is down there. That was critical. One of the things that happens when you put a big long swing arm on a bike like this, when you go to launch, and if you search the internet, you'll see if you launch, the spring will compress. Well, once the spring compresses, it'll actually bounce back and the rear wheel will come off the ground. There's pictures of guys leaving the line, their front wheels in the air, their back wheels in the air, because they couldn't control the spring bounce, because when you've got all this leverage, you got to have a heavy spring. Well, if you've got a heavy spring, it's going to want to spring back. So I went to Ohlins and we put the shock on a shock dyno, and I said, listen guys, I need a lot more rebound dampening, which means I want to really slow down how that bike comes back. We couldn't do it with just valving, even with an off-the-shelf Ohlins shock, which is a really good shock. We had to change the piston and revalve it. And by the time we did that, we got it slowed down so much that when we put it on the shock dyno, the guys from Ohlins actually left the room. They were afraid we were going to blow the shock up, because it was, instead of building 250 pounds of compression dampening force, we built 2,000 pounds of compression dampening force. So what that allowed us to do was, when that bike squatted, and if you've seen our suspension videos before, we could crank up that rebound and that thing would come up nice and slow. We could keep it planted going forward. On a perfect pass, this bike would squat, and you can see this little notch here. That showed me if I was squatting too much, right? I've torn these things all up. So if it squats too much, the tire's hitting in here, that's friction. You don't want that. So on a perfect pass, this would barely touch. We had a shaved oil plug, and that oil plug would go down, touch the track, and peel a little layer of rubber off, and it'd stick to the bottom of the engine. Perfect pass. This bike back then, and it's a full-blown street bike. You can tell we didn't take a bunch of things off. I've still got all the instruments, the speedo, the fuel gauge. I really did ride the bike on the street. To have all this stuff working correctly was the secret. This bike would run 130, I think I did a 136 60-foot hand clutch with a single stage. You put a multi-stage in this thing, it'd be in the 120s. But with a hand clutch 130s, 60-foot, 134, I think my best ever was 132, which was pretty good back then. Macintosh made the arm, and then you're going to hear a lot about Mickey-Thompson. Those guys came in and actually developed, and I was part of the tire testing crew, they developed a tire for drag racing, because this bike, we were using the old Yokohamas and spending $1,000 for a worn out Yokohama, because it's the only thing that would get us down the track. And even with those tires at my home track, when I would practice, the 1,000-foot club, the guys sitting at the 1,000-foot club, they loved taking videos of me going across the finish line, because the bike white smoked the tire at 1,000 foot all the way across the quarter-mile marker, and like the old dragsters did back in the day, right? We just didn't have enough traction. Mickey-Thompson was kind enough to do the development and come up with a tire that could take the power that we were creating. So real quick, what I'll do, let me pull off the seat here, show you some of the stuff from back in the day. All right, so this is what it takes. We didn't have lithium batteries back then. We had a regular battery. Had to have a bunch of relays. Pulled off the stock ignition. We used old Dyna 2000, which let us adjust the timing and adjust our ignition curve. Schnitz Racing controller. This thing was so instrumental in getting us into the sevens. And even after 20 years, if I turn it on, it actually retained all of its settings. This bike sat for 10 years. But you've got, what do we got? Nitrous start percent, 10%. That's when I stab the button. And then the final percent, 95. We actually figured out that the bike made a little bit more power. Not sure if it was because of the pulsing of the solenoids or what. But anyway, you'll also notice ample use of butt connectors. And you know, everybody will tell you, oh, you know, you gotta have solder connections, or you know, they'll go back. No, if you do a butt connection correctly, if you got the Destaco tool with the little pointy crimper. 20 years ago I wired this bike, and you'll see here in a minute that all of the electronics and wiring works just fine. One other thing, and this is the best. This is a $4 air compressor from Kmart. A 20-year-old $4 air compressor from Kmart. And what that is for is to fill the air shifter. So you need pressure to be able to use the air shifter. And basically what this does is it takes the place of your foot. I fill it up. And then come over here. I usually use about 140 PSI. And then, so with an electric shift, they're great, right? You got the gas wide open and you don't touch the clutch and you lift up and your bike shifts. Well, the problem with drag racing is when you're doing a 130 60 foot, you're pulling about 2.5 G's. Your legs weigh a couple hundred pounds apiece. And you're not really in a big hurry to get them on the pegs, because I use mine as feelers. It's sort of almost like in the swimming pool, right? When you're a kid, if your feet touch, you're okay. If your feet don't touch, then you don't really know where you're at. Well, we use our feet as feelers. So that's why with the air shifter, we hold the gas wide open, we let the clutch is out, and then I just press my horn button. Ba, 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 and the bike shifts. And it does it with a lot of nitrous oxide, and it's really sort of violent and fun. But anyway, enough talking. I'm going to go ahead and gear up here and we'll chat. Now, one of the things we are going to chat about is Mickey-Thompson came up with a first in the 7 Second Club. You can see here me, Johnny Locklear, Ryan Schnitz, Keith Dennis, Duck Lauer, Randy Waters, and Tom Maselli. There were 7 members of the Mickey-Thompson 7 Second Club. I got my jacket. This was a long time ago. I was quite a bit smaller. I got a custom jacket here that I very proudly, very proudly wore. Not bad. To the next race, because I was the only one that had the jacket, so I could go up to guys like Johnny Locklear and Keith Dennis and go, "Hey man, what's up? Who's fast?" Anyway, we're gonna go have some fun. I'll chat with you more on the ride. I'm gonna go ahead and suit up and see it in a few. All right, here we are. We're gonna go ahead and fire it up here. I wanted to show you this. This bike's got 20 years of license plate stickers on it. I don't ride it much, but I like having the ability to just jump on it and go if I like. It's exactly how it was when we ran the first 7 second pass. You saw the lithium battery. I went ahead and put some Sprint filters on it just so we'd keep the air clean. I have a baffle I'm going to stick in, or I was going to stick in, but I decided that that was a little boring. We're going to go ahead and run it open. Oh, and let's just turn on the nitrous. Why not? Might feel a little froggy during this ride. All right, here we go. Give it a little squirt. I love this bike. Yeah, I really love this bike. We had some rain earlier, so I'm going to have to watch the roads. A really fast bike and wet roads don't work out sometimes. Yeah, she's a little lopey. That's one thing, webcam made us some cams, and I didn't run the real high lift. You don't need to with nitrous. You just need to put a bunch of nitrous in there. I know I keep saying that, but I mean a whole lot of nitrous in a very reliable engine. As soon as we went above about 380 lift, it started chewing up rocker arms and doing bad stuff, so. Also has some pretty tall gearing to keep the front end on the ground.
Of course, as you can see, we have the tracking vehicle in front of us, which is going to be a big nuisance, so I'm going to have to get around him. All right, let's just go play. Wow, this thing is brutal. I forgot how fast this damn thing was. And what you saw up there, of course, was my shift light. Alright, we have a bike with a sidewinder. Dragging a knee in a right-hand corner is a really bad idea. Alright, now we got a left-hand corner, but we are slammed, so we can't really take it too seriously. You can see we've still got a little water on the road here, trying to find a road that's not so wet. Talk about the air shifter. So basically all I'm going to do is press the horn button and the bike's going to shift like magic. I remember the first time I pressed an air shifter button, I just giggled like a schoolgirl. See over here, press it. Didn't let off the gas. Works great for wide open, high RPM shifts. And like I said, you can shift the entire quarter mile without ever even putting your feet up on the pegs if you don't want to. Oh, we got a little traction that time. All right. Can't go for a ride on a 7-second bike without making a run. Let's see what we can do. We got a little bit in there. Pump up the shifter. Looking for 140. And just for shits and giggles, let's arm the nitrous. Oh yeah. Now we're all ready. Great news is we got a car. And another car. Alright, here we go. A little suspension and tire pressure adjustment. I just didn't have enough traction to be able to use the spray on that one. But a little bit of adjustment and we'd be right in business. Get this thing to hook on the street at 68 inches, it's crazy. All right, see if we can get her to Nope, gonna have to leave a little softer than that. Well, if you can't go fast, you might as well have fun. So let's talk about the street bike shootout class. It was an AMA Pro Star class. It originally started out as the Cycle World Street Bike Shootout. It was a once-a-year event that the godfather of no wheelie bar street tire bikes, Kent Stotts, originally got started. I believe it was with Nick Inash, and it was a once-a-year event. Problem once a year was, if you won it, I won it in 1996. I mean, if you had a problem, you had to wait an entire year to race again. So they ended up making the street bike shootout class official with the unlimited class was basically run what you brung, as long as you were 68 inches and could pass the road course, you were good to go. Turbo and nitrous, nitromethane, pick it. It doesn't matter. Whatever you want to run, so long as you can pass the road course. I really enjoyed Street Bike Shootout because, I mean, this is a full-blown 7-second race bike that I'm riding around on, instead of it sitting over in the corner of my garage, where once a month I go to a national event, throw thousands of dollars at it, break it, and it sits over in the corner of the garage after the race or in the trailer with the tires going flat until I can come up with enough money to fix it and go out again. The thing with the street bike classes are, you can actually get some enjoyment out of these bikes when you're not at the racetrack. And I loved it. It was really perfect for me. The class got very popular. Now, I want you to picture this. A 25-mile road course, and all of the classes, they had stock wheelbase, they had modified, and they had unlimited, would all compete in the 25-mile road course together. So here's these bikes slammed on the ground, stretched, sidewinder pipes, and the biggest road course was at Indianapolis, and we'd go along their road race course, along their oval. They got I think it's a 3/8 or half-mile asphalt oval. And we would just follow each other. You know what happens when drag racers get next to each other, or any competitive racer gets next to each other. It doesn't matter whether it's a 25-mile road course or out on the street or next to each other in the quarter mile. They're going to screw around. So part of Indy's road race course, you'd go along the back area behind the grandstands, and then you would come up basically where the start of the finish line, or the starting line at the drag strip was, go down the drag strip all the way down to the end, and then continue on the road course. Well, like I said, 60 guys all on a racetrack, whether they're on stretch bikes or not. We'd go down that drag strip racing each other. We'd go 160, 170 miles an hour. And then there was a sharp right-hand corner as you got back onto the road race portion. And man, I'll never forget, I was behind Dick Speed from Chicago. He went into that corner, and there were so many sparks off of his exhaust. I thought he went down, but I was getting showered in sparks. I couldn't see, there were so many sparks in front of me. It was a lot of fun. We had a great time back then. And you know, we're stretched. This is a nice curvy road. Now, don't get me wrong, it's a little more fun on a stock wheelbase bike, but hell, I can come down through here and really enjoy myself. Said you always have to watch. I just felt the pipe scrape just a little bit. So really what had happened is the class had gained in popularity, and a lot of people wanted to get into it. The OEMs got involved, Kawasaki got involved, Suzuki got involved. They were sort of already involved because Suzukis are a great platform for drag racing, but so you had some of the fastest riders of the day. You know, Brian Schnitz was just starting out. He was super fast. His dad had put him on a little 500cc cow when he was about 12, I think, put him on the drag strip. So he knew what he was doing. By the time that kid was 16, he was really fast already. He rode for us for a couple years. Did a great job. Johnny Locklear is one of those guys that if you're in the mainstream, you're probably not going to know Johnny. He's from the Carolinas. If you're from the grud scene and you want a bike that is unbelievably fast and a rider that really knows how to ride, Johnny was amazing. Keith Dennis, you know, Keith is legendary. He's won just about everything in our sport at one time or another. Definitely one of the best. I got a story. So my first 7-second run was in the first round of eliminations. I was against John Vermeulen. I can't remember what I qualified, but anyway, I ran the first 7, and when I picked up the time slip, I looked at it and it didn't register. I'm like, what's wrong with this slip though? You know, I don't understand these numbers. And John looked at the slip and he goes, "You did it, you got in the 7th. The dude flipped out, and I looked at it again and was like, holy cow, 797. So I come back, I come down the return road, I'm all happy as can be. Well, of course, I broke the back of 50, 60 other guys who all wanted to be the first also. So, we came out to the second round, and I had Keith Dennis, and Keith Saul was strong. Well, his bike was running funny, and I could hear it. And my crew chief, Mark Hulsman, he goes, "Man, I think that thing's broke." He said, just make a smooth pass, don't screw it up, don't red light, and you should have this. And man, that light dropped, and Keith did exactly what he always did. That dude tore out on me. I mean, I didn't even know where he was going. He was out so far on me. I mean, to put it into perspective, when I was in second gear, he was way up there. And generally in a drag race like this, you're not catching somebody who's that far out. Well, I have 2 stages of nitrous. I told you about the 150 shot. Well, I also have what I call a panic button. And what would happen if I was behind, I just flick my high beam and shoot another 50 horsepower. The problem is that Rockingham's surface couldn't take that, and every time I hit my second stage, it spun the tire and I slowed down. So Keith's out on me, and it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I wanted to hit that button so hard, but I knew I would lose that race, and I just held in there, and I curled into the paint and reeled him in. And I went another 7. I think I went a 798 on that pass, but he ran something real quick. It was like an 804. I mean, it was super close. I managed to win again, and we ended up going into the 7s 3 times that day. No one else got into the 7s that day. And I ended up losing in the final to Duck Lauer. Duck's a street racer from Chicago. He kept his head on straight. And of course, I was smart enough to not change one thing on the first 7-second motorcycle. But what had happened was, as we were going, the tire had started to wear. And if you look, as soon as I hit the button on that run, it spun just for a split second, and Duck jumped out on me. And man, he always had a lot of horsepower. There was no doubt about that, and I couldn't reel him in. So. Yeah, it would have been fun to win the race and run the first 7, but it wasn't in the cards that day. It doesn't matter. We get to go down in history, and it's a lot of fun. And this bike has set numerous quarter-mile records, mile-per-hour records, ET records. I used to set a lot of records, and then somebody would come and they'd break them, and then I'd have to set them again. And somebody else would break them and set them again. But the best thing about being the first in the 7s is that, someone else may always be faster, but no one else is going to be first. Somehow every time I ride my bike into work, I find a lot of traffic. So one of the things that happened as a result of the first 7 was I got a lot of notoriety, and at the time I was working out of my garage, trying to get my business going, and all of a sudden the phone started ringing, because when you go 7s before everybody else, you obviously know what you're doing. And I had call after call, "Hey, what do you make for my bike?" And I mean, I'm pretty confident at the time, but nothing. But what do you want? I can do anything. And that's really when the product side of Brock's got rolling, because we had a whole lot of people that wanted in on what we knew. The Hayabusa just came out, and it basically made these engines that we're riding on right now obsolete. Oh, look! No traffic. Pump up the shifter, have a little bit more fun, because we're on the last leg before get to the office. Cops like to sit there. fast this thing was. Even though it's a nitrous motor, back in the day, I ran 860s at 155 or so without nitrous. So it's definitely no slug as we're driving it around like this. In fact, it's a hell of a lot of fun. Little noisy. I might end up getting in trouble with the popo here in Mexico. Mexican police, they don't like noise. Effortlessly spin the tire.
Dude, this thing is so much fun. I really love this motorcycle. It's my favorite bike. Guys, I hope you've enjoyed coming in for the ride. We're here at Brock's. This doesn't feel like a work day to me, so I think I'm going to go ahead and play the boss card and go ride around a little bit more. So I'm Brock from Brock's Performance. Until next time, we'll see you then.
How about a rolling burnout for the boys?